now if you go on Henry Ford Museum's website, there's literally just a tab that says Henry Ford and anti-Semitism.
Yeah. Like I've told this story so many times about like kids all across the Midwest have to learn how to square dance because Henry Ford was convinced that jazz was a Jewish plot to weaponize black music to degrade white culture. Like, yeah, I mean, Hussein, I wanted to say this to Hussein because Hussein has a lot of experience with British suburbs, but British suburbs and American suburbs are such a different vibe because American suburbs, it's so much like, here's the city limits, here's the county line, here's the dividing line. It's like, we have our own police force, and also, we can't officially say it anymore post-1965, but if you're black, we're going to pull your car over.
Yeah, yes. It feels like there's sort of, I've been very fascinated. Again, this is very much like, maybe like this my sort of pull towards Midwest emo, like suburban emo kind of comes out of this too, but it does sort of feel like the suburbs and like the American experience was like a lot more I guess you have like the suburban vote in the States, right? And that's like a distinct thing, and there's like distinct politics, and there's like a defense of the suburbs, and I know that there are like racial elements like towards that.
I mean, there's more than racial elements to it. Like they were designed to exclude non-white people, and
also like lots of suburbs were like company suburbs as well. Like it's kind of the link between commerce and like that type of familial arrangement. Whereas like, and I don't know too much about the history of the British suburbs, but it's not really talked about in that way. I think in terms of the British suburbs, I guess you have like, if you're looking at like distinct types of voter or distinct types of like residents in relation to like political outcomes, I suppose one element of that is like the commuter town. So like I grew up in a commuter town, which in the sense of like it was a suburb that was like near enough to the city, and like the reason why house prices, for example, were so high there compared to like other sort of suburbs. Again, if you're thinking about the north, or you're thinking about like, you know, the Midland suburbs and stuff, the suburb where I was from kind of had that premise of like, oh no, you have this kind of like leafy-ish place. It's not, you know, not particularly well cured. It's like very sort of dilapidated in lots of ways, but because it had a train station, suddenly it's like, oh, you know, it's like one of those fancy suburbs, right? Like you can get into London from there. I mean, albeit your train to London will take ages and it will suck, and like the trains will smell of piss. They still smell of piss. But like this unique smell between British McDonald's and piss is kind of how I would describe the Southeastern Rail.
Does British McDonald's smell differently?
Yeah, your British piss smells more like baked beans and tomatoes than ours.
You know what doesn't smell differently in Britain than America? Papa John's, because it's really popular here and it smells just like it does in America. The first time I clocked this, I was riding my bike in the summer here, the first year I lived here, and I went past the one on Tower Bridge Road, and it was just so weird because smells trigger memories for me. I think they do for a lot of people. And I was like, it smells the exact same as the Papa John's in fucking Westfield, Indiana, which was at the like strip mall right over the city limits out of Carmel into Westfield, where we would both buy pizza. And there was a Blockbuster Video. Karma Records was there. I can't remember the name of the chain of I think it was like Royal something of the chain of movie theaters, but we went to we walked on a road with no sidewalks to go see the Beavis and Butthead Do America, because like what the fuck else are you gonna do? Where I got chased by the cops because we were out past curfew. We wanted to buy donuts from the grocery store before they closed, because if you were under 18, you couldn't be out off your parents' property after 10 p.m. in the city I lived in, and the cops would arrest you. And I'm dead serious. We had a fucking curfew in Carmel.
Can I ask you a question about like jaywalking?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So, like,
it's called
in
a sport.
American pop culture, mostly, and my main reference of this is my main reference of America and why I fell in love with America, which is Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. There's a scene where one of them gets arrested for jaywalking. And I was like, no, that must be this.
Britain
like,
doesn't have a concept of jaywalking. You can just cross in the middle of the fucking street anywhere. Like,
my inner Caucasian is coming out. Like, yes, just simply walk into traffic, assert your dominance over the cars.
You've been to Britain. You see what it's like here.
See, I have a hard time understanding if my conceptualization of like crosswalks comes from Armenia or not, which is they are a suggestion. Cars will not stop for you. You just walk out. And I get some really weird looks in the Netherlands because everybody's like, no, you must wait for the green light. Meanwhile, I'll just walk out in the middle of a fucking train. Like, it'll stop. Fuck off.
In Britain, I think it's weird because it's like a sort of a really strange hybrid. And I think actually it's changed in recent years.
It really has.
Partly because driving has gotten worse, but also because like post-COVID brain, I think people have just gotten meaner. But it was like that thing where So like I think in Britain for a long time, the idea like jaywalking is not a concept here, and like being in London and everything, it's very common for people to just sort of cross wherever. I really don't like driving in certain parts, like not because of other cars, but also just because like you never know when someone's just sort of going to pop out and they're just gonna casually walk. If this happened to me like a few weeks ago, I had to like do a bit of a drive through Wembley, and like some guy just sort of like comes across the road, and like I just about see him, and luckily the car that my wife and I have has like a sensor on it, and so the sensor was able to stop me. If I didn't have that, I don't know what would have happened. But the guy is just sort of looking at me as he's walking like he's walking straight, but he's staring at me. And so like it looks really weird, but it is, I think, as Joe, you were saying, like it is just like a guy asserting his dominance over me. And like to a degree, I was just like, yeah, okay, I'm not a pro car person by any means, and so like I have to support you for like challenging and defeating me. But at the same time, there was a traffic light like literally right next to you, and it doesn't make sense why you didn't use that.
Much like Yu-Gi-Oh, you have to give him your stars because he defeated you in one-on-one combat.
That is true, and my strongest monster in my deck. And the other part of it was also like zebra crossings, as you mentioned, like the crosswalks, the zebra crossings, where it's like one of the only places where a car is supposed to stop for you. And
recently they've just stopped. Recently, people just won't stop for you.
But recently they just don't. Like this happened again.
All the time now.
This happened to me like quite recently where I live now, where there is like a very clear like marking for a zebra crossing, and I'm about to cross, and the car like just kind of drives around me. And it was like surprise. It was like the first time it's happened to me, but like it's happened quite frequently to lots of people that I know, and so it does sort of feel like a bit of a Wild West in the sense of like, yeah, the rules. I mean, look, you and I, Nate, we've talked about driving a lot, and one of the jokes that sort of have is like you can learn the way that you are taught driving in Britain is like this very sort of mercurial way, like this very sort of specific way of
rigid
driving.
And by the brook, and no one drives that way.
It's very rigid,
and even taking your test or learning to drive, the problem you come up against is that the minute you start trying to follow the rules, cars just like go the wrong way down a one-way street on the sidewalk, like running over fucking wheelchairs to get around you because like
they're simply training to drive into Tbilisi or Yerevan.
I passed my test and I learned how to drive. Like I took my test 4 times and I passed it on my 4th time. It's not like an uncommon thing that you'll sort of fail it a few times before you pass it.
Really?
I failed my first test, and there was such a backlog for a retest that I just haven't had a chance to take one. But now that I'm moving, I'm not going to. But it's just it was going to be over a year to wait on my next test.
In comparison to getting a driver's license in the U.S., I took the test when I was 15, and I think it was so incredibly easy in retro. So, I mean, I'm almost 36 now, and I don't drive anymore. I ride a bicycle, but like I have no plans of buying a car or anything. But like the idea that I was physically or mentally able to pilot a car after taking that test is insane.
Yeah, the test in Britain is an hour long, and there's a couple of like maneuvers they test you on. And I actually got to minute 55, but I didn't turn my signal off quickly enough entering a roundabout, and someone had to slightly change their course because of me, and so that was an instant fail.
Oh man, I did so many fucking weird things on the road during my test, and they didn't give a shit. Like I couldn't even parallel park. They're like, you'll figure it out. It
wasn't even that I forgot to turn it off, it's that I didn't turn it off. I didn't turn it off fast enough, so a person stopped thinking that I was, or rather, they started going thinking I was turning. I turned it off, and as I was entering the roundabout, and so they then had to stop because or slow down because of me, and because I made them react to me. That's a instant fail on the test.
You've inconvenienced one of your betters. You'd fail. Come back.
I'm pretty sure the only instant fail in an American driving test is hitting someone else.
Hitting someone. Yeah.
No. I failed. I failed my first driver's test because the person who was testing me said make a right at this intersection, and I said okay. So the stoplight up there, I'm going to make a right. And then she said, no, right here, this intersection, which was just like a side street. So I slammed on the brakes to make the turn. And that was one of those like immediate, like, yeah, I know I'm going to we might as well go back. I'm going to have to come back.
I also failed my first exam, had nothing to do with my driving ability. I failed before they even let me drive because I took the paper test and then I went out. You have to supply your own car. They don't give you one to test in. I was using my mom's. And I sit down inside the car. The grader gets in. He's like, you smell like weed. And the thing is I swear to fucking God, I was not high. However,